Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Yeah. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, John Greenewald is with us of the Black Vault. Today's Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. And for those that don't know, John is the purveyor, the guy behind the Black Vault. Since 1996 and the age of 15, he has been a pest to all of the government agencies, the DOD, Washington, D.C., on many different issues and conspiracies with his Freedom of Information Act campaign and posting those confirmed documents online. And it's been a great ride, and he's very important, not only to me, but the rest of the community. And so let's get straight to it tonight. John, welcome back to Fade to Black. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing good. Thank you for that intro. Always good to be here. I'm excited. Congrats on the new format, by the way. Very cool.
Yeah, well, that entitles you to an abridged bio.
Yeah, which is great. I'm pretty long-winded. It may come as a shock to some people.
Well, your dad's probably listening tonight, as he always does, and he's like, "Where's the long bio? Where's my son's bio?" So
we should call Dad next time. Have him do the bio.
Yeah, I would love that. Actually.
You'd need a 5-hour show for that one. If you think I'm long-winded, God bless you, Dad. I got it from you.
The DNA, man. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Here's the thing. We've got so much to discuss tonight, and I'm glad that we can do it in, the new format and things, because we can just keep our minds locked and move forward. But I want to say this, and I'm sure that I've said this before, either on this program or to you privately, but it's worth repeating. Which is the internet in 1996 was a different animal, and it was pretty mysterious, and it was also difficult, right? The lack of search engines and everything else that was going on, dial-up modems and things. But when I found the Black Vault, which was probably as you launched it, I thought of a few different things. Number one, holy crap, this is what the internet is about, the top secret stuff, right? I mean, it was such a mysterious place. There was that. And then I also felt, and it was because of the title, right, the Black Vault, that if I'm, surfing through your stuff and looking at these documents, that at any moment I'm going to have somebody knocking at my door, right? And I really felt that you were breaking that kind of ground, and laws for that matter. And here we are. It's 2022, moving into 23. Things are bigger and better than they've ever been. Two questions. One, did you expect it to last this long and to be as successful as it is? That's number one. And number two, have you had an MIB experience? I just called you. I called you VIB, Vault in Black.
Vault in Black.
Yeah.
So I'll deal with the latter question first. No, and that's always surprised me. But let me say why I say that. Not the Men in Black and the mysterious conspiracy way, but rather just more of the generalized government person knocking on the door because I got something on accident. We have to keep in mind that FOIA officers are human. They make mistakes, even though there's a lot of processes that they follow to declassify documents. Stuff can slip out. It's no secret, although I don't talk about it often, there have been mistakes made before. I've done over 10,000 requests, and I can count on one hand how many mistakes there've been when it gets into accidental releases. But I always comply giving it back. But I always wanted to understand if something like that happened, would they knock on the door? And when it did, I won't say it was classified, highly top secret or anything like that. But there was exempted information that came my way. And again, I got contacted, but no knock on the door. That has never happened. I've never had any threats, official threats from the government. I've had people come after me, with threats on the internet, but nothing MIB wise in the way that you're asking. The first part of your question, did I ever expect 26 years after I started that I would be still here in the Black Vault version 100.5 versus what it used to be in 1.0? I would say you're crazy. But I have absolutely loved what I've been able to do. It's fun. It's driven by my curiosity. I'm not a quote unquote experiencer when it comes to the UFO stuff. And the reason why I say that is a lot of people get into this field because they've had an experience of some kind. And that's just not me. I mean, I've been fascinated by government secrets. UFOs has always been a personal favorite of mine, but I deal with everything. I just never thought it would be this long that I would stick with it, but it's too much fun. It creates so many fun conversations. So many questions are created by looking at that information, and I can't let it go. I don't get bored with it, and if I do get bored periodically with a certain topic, I have like 30,000 other topics that you can choose from when it comes to government secrets. So there's never a shortage of what you can go after. And do I think I'll be here in another 26 years if I'm alive? Very likely so.
Yeah, it seems that way. And how is the party changed? And I do mean the festive part of this environment, the party, in that in the 90s there were a lot of explosive things that were taking off. You had, without going down a long list of stuff, but you had MJ-12, you had Project Serpo, you had the alien autopsy video, you had Area 51 and Bob Lazar, and the UFO subject in general because of the internet. Today, we've got like real genuine, because all of the other stuff from the government back then turned out to be either a smokescreen or a hoax, as opposed to today, where we're making genuine strides forward. How has it changed for you?
Well, I always look at, with the conversation morphing the way that it has, that's a positive, and I think that that's good. From 1996 to 2022, the internet is a much different beast. So people can communicate and share information, with the click of a mouse across the planet. So even with just that, the data sharing and everything has created a much more interesting experience when it comes to this topic and sharing information. But I would still say that you still have a level of hoaxers out there. And by sheer number, you would have a lot more nowadays. You have a lot more mud. So you have a lot of positive stuff going on. But in the same respect, you have this whole opposite end of the spectrum, which is the ease of monetizing hoaxes. And that's easily provable. You look at YouTube, you or any researcher in this field can put up something pretty interesting, verifiable, and you might get 100,000 views. If you put something fake up and it looks, outrageously cool, but it's a fake, you get 10 million views and you make 1,000 times, the money. Mm-hmm. Where I'm going with this is that monetization has created an army of people that don't care about the information that's put forward. They just don't. I mean, you look at some of the channels out there, they care more about their views and clicks and just putting whatever they can out there because that's what they do. And they make a good living off of it. So you have both ends of the spectrum here in 2022 where, yes, there's a lot of great stuff happening, but sadly, there's a lot of mud that you have to sift through. I'm not saying it was any better a couple decades ago, but at least you had a little bit less mud to have to wade through to get through this. And you had more of I would say an effort to try and investigate this. You know, you look at legends like Stanton Friedman. We may not agree on ultimately if the MJ-12 documents were real or not or whatever, but you cannot hide from the fact that that man put boots on the ground and he flew to places, going through archives, going through documents. He put in that legwork and came up with the conclusion that he did. That's research. How many times do you see that today? Right? You just don't see it a lot. It's just very few people. So, you know, to your question, it's great and exciting, but in the same respect, we have to be cautious with the stories that were being presented.
The other side of this, and then we're going to get into what's going on right now. But the other side of this, when you were doing a FOIA request in 1996, 1997, and your UFO or whatever your terms were back then, that was more of a historical perspective. Where today, when you're doing, I don't know what your search terms are, but it's different, right? Now you're going after real communique about UAPs and UFOs and videos and statements and emails. It's got to be a whole different feeling for you.
It is because, and you're right. A lot of what I was going after before were decades old.
Right.
What was interesting, though, was that the scope of my research, so going prior to 2017, was essentially proving a very provable reality, which was they were still interested in UFOs after their Project Blue Book investigation that stopped in 1969. For some, that sounds a little snoozy because it's way back in 1969 into the 70s. Who cares? But it really shows that these phenomena never went away, that they were being archived within the documentation of the CIA, the DIA, all well past what they wanted to admit to. So when 2017 came around, partly in October of that year, but then obviously it drilled home in December that there was this secret UFO effort, at least that's what was being reported. That was incredibly exciting because now it put all those puzzle pieces back into play, but then opened up a whole new world where you can then take those old puzzle pieces and start going after the new ones and see how everything connects, see how things maybe coincide with each other, or do they reflect the same types of phenomena? Do they differ entirely? What I thought was going to open up a whole new world. But now fast forward a couple of years, it's kind of a nightmare to try and figure out what happened during that initial, I say quote unquote UFO program, because we just don't have any reports or anything like that like we did through Project Blue Book. We have a couple of videos and that's the extent of what we have. So it morphed then, but then morphed again once the UAP task force came around, and then morphed yet again once Arrow kind of came around, and it's still arguably getting on its feet. And why I'm saying it that way is that each approach was different, and each way you go after information through FOIA, sadly, it's not as easy as a keyword search. If you're doing a FOIA request for emails, yes, then keywords take play. But it's really following paper trails and figuring out all of these different puzzle pieces. A prime example is the 2021 UAP report. I first read it. We all got upset. I, digitally threw it against the wall and said, this is ridiculous. And then you take a deep breath, you go back and read it. That report stemmed more than 50 FOIA requests that I had filed to kind of trace down every single lane, every single branch of the tree, every single puzzle piece. So my whole point with this is you have to adapt to the day, and things constantly change on how this is being presented to all of us. And we just have to adapt in the process, whether we're doing FOIA or just thinking about it. It is changing all the time, and it's fascinating.
A month ago, you did a post. I think we talked on the phone immediately after that. About the report, the new report, and that these are your words, right? I'm paraphrasing, but hundreds of cases, hundreds of videos, hundreds of photograph, whatever, right? But you said you will comment about what you know.
Yes.
All right. So take me back to that. What did you know when you did that post?
Yeah. So that was either Thanksgiving Day or the day after Thanksgiving. And I think a couple people have been disgruntled at me because they feel that was a tease. It's not a tease. That's the lead. The lead is that it is now verifiable with documentation. So I'm not saying it's a secret source. Like, this is through a legal case that I have with the Department of Defense, namely the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff. And in this case, one of the line items that I had asked for was a copy of every photograph and video that the Aero office was currently investigating. That's the key. And the problem, the pushback that came from that was that it was too broad. So I pushed back and I said, well, why is it too broad? Why are you telling me you can't process this? Because the Navy processed a similar request over there. They just told me everything was classified. So now OSD is telling me, well, it's too broad. We can't do that. Now, when things are too broad from a legal standpoint, what essentially that translates to is that you have a voluminous amount of information that they would have a what's called a burdensome search to try and find what you're looking for. So my question was, well, why is that burdensome? Why is this too broad? And in the course of that conversation in writing, because I'm stressing that, again, this is not a secret source telephone call that you have to trust me on. In writing, they said because the responsive records, when it came to the, how I worded it, current investigations into the photographs and videos of what was tagged as unidentified aerial phenomena, equaled into the hundreds. And as a result, that's too much for them. They can't go through the hundreds, however many hundreds there are, but the hundreds of videos and photographs that I requested, and it was pushed back to me. Now, it's frustrating it was pushed back, but pretty darn interesting that they are putting in writing that Aero has, quote unquote, hundreds of these types of case files that they are currently looking into. Now, why do I keep stressing currently? Well, their current report, if there is one, are those considered closed cases? And we don't know the answer to that. So are they referencing what we are potentially going to see in this report? Maybe. But does that mean that hundreds of cases are still being investigated with no answer? That's pretty interesting in my book, because if they were, somewhat identifiable, they likely wouldn't be under the label of currently investigated. So I know I'm kind of stressing some of these words, but there's a reason. Because when you say, give me all currently investigated material, not past, then that is a certain data set of responsive records. If I say, give me everything that's closed, that is labeled identified, they may push it back and say too broad, but regardless, that's a different data set. And so that's what you try and kind of wade through when you're using the FOIA. So it was an encouraging development, but also very frustrating, because now I'm trying to figure out, I think I have a couple of ideas, but trying to figure out what is a way that I could whittle this down into something that is not burdensome, that would yield something in response to my request. But at least I know that the data set that I'm going for totals hundreds of photos and videos. That's pretty fascinating to me.
What do you think that this report has been drafted?
I do.
Okay. And is that an opinion, or are you basing that on something?
Well, in the process of trying to get a story for everybody, because as you know, I love writing and doing update videos and so on, I have knocked on pretty much every door possible. Yes, it sounds like a report has been drafted. The goal, from what I was told anyway, was going to be the 31st on time. And then 31st turned...
October 31st.
Correct, yeah. Then the 31st turned into, that was a Monday. So then potentially towards the end of the week. I was also not the only one hearing this. If you look around on Twitter, there were a few different journalists who were also pushing their contacts. Hey, what's going on with this? They were hearing mid to late week that week. So it kind of coincided. So that's why I feel a little bit more comfortable saying, hey, I was hearing this, but so were other people, that this was not some, a secret that nobody was hearing. That's what journalists were starting to post online.
Let me jump in. I apologize for interrupting.
Don't.
Are you basing that on conversations with other journalists or friends? Or are you basing on that from an official government source?
I don't want to say official government source, but they were government sources. And why I say it that way is that they never put anything in writing. They would not comment on the record. So I couldn't come out with any statement. And if anybody knows me, I hate that. I don't like doing stories on anonymous. So I was mostly mum about it. I don't mind talking about this aspect of it now because, again, there were other journalists that were hearing very similar, if not exactly the same things, maybe even from the same people for all I know. But these were people that were working on the inside. Multiple people had talked about drafts of the report, and also the kind of going, I don't want to say story, but the going excuse, I guess you can say, is that rewriting was part of this process. So that the original drafts apparently did not satisfy all of the requirements. I don't have details on that. It's not because I don't want to tell you. I just don't have them. But the consensus was that they were still trying to, rework that draft. So some journalists out there have talked about it being part of the approval process. Others describe that being just part of, draft A is kicked back. You try draft B and it gets kicked back. However you want to term it, that's kind of what I've been led to believe is what's going on. Now, in the last 2 weeks, I have followed up, again, trying to get official on the record comment from ODNI numerous times. And I cannot now get anybody to call or write back. I get read receipts. I know they're getting them, but nobody is able to get comments. I even saw Tyler Rogaway from The Drive post today. He too has been knocking on doors, and it's like it is what it is. The report is late, and that's it.
Let's stay with ODNI for a second.
Sure.
And the reason why, I had Danny Sheehan on the show on Monday, and he said a couple of things that raised an eyebrow for me, and I think for the community in general, that there is no task force, that Bray doesn't, isn't, and there isn't anybody else there, and they're not investigating anything. Nobody's been appointed. And so if this report has been drafted, it's not coming from any version of the task force, whatever you want to call it, Arrow, UAP, TF, Part 2, whatever you want to call it, 2.0. Is it being drafted? Was it drafted from inside of the ODNI and not from some task force?
So that part I don't know. I don't have any information on that. I am going to respectfully disagree with, and I've seen some of the clips from the interview. I didn't see 100% of the entire show, but I saw the part where he was saying this, and I'm going to respectfully disagree. I mean, you've got DOD memos that are going out. They've named Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick as the head of this. If they're not doing anything, that's fine. But why is a legal case that I've filed coming back with that specific group, meaning Arrow, has hundreds of tagged UAP photos and videos that they're currently investigating? If there was no task force and this was just all on paper and they're like, look, no one really cares. Sure, name that guy, whatever, that'll satisfy Congress and it's all a ruse. That's fine. But when you start filing legal cases for the workload, what they're doing, you're going to get no records responses. So this isn't a reverse cover up where there's nothing to find, but the government's going to say, oh, we've got hundreds of UAP related photos and videos, but we can't give them to you. I don't see that happening. again just respectfully disagree with that notion. Now, if he's leaning towards, but maybe exaggerating a little bit, leaning towards that there are portions of this effort that maybe aren't official, that these are kind of that debate about ATIP and Luis Elizondo, which I know makes some people cringe. Right. But if this is like stuff they did in addition to their normal job and their normal mission, whatever that may be for the DOD, I mean, I can buy that. I can really buy that. In fact, today I interviewed Dr. Travis Taylor, and it was very similar with his description of the UAP task force. So again, the group prior to Arrow. And what essentially he was talking about was that you did have that core person, the director of the task force, which was Jay Stratton. I've been able to prove that through documents, and now Travis was able to say it on the record. So now we've got all sorts of evidence to it, but we knew that. But now it's just, more than official. So we have that director, but then who was under him? And it sounded like from Dr. Taylor's answer to me was that there were a lot of people that were being pulled from all these different areas and agencies and branches to kind of help with the effort. And what was fascinating to me about that description was I found a document that had never been released before from the NRO, revealing a factoid about the task force that had never been released before, which they labeled the UAPTF advisory panel. Now, we could all want to safely assume that they would have an advisory panel, but that was never officially confirmed. So when the NRO sent me this document declassified, I was like, wait a minute, advisory panel, who's on this? Now, I still have open cases to figure that out. Maybe a long shot if I'll get it. But I brought it up to Dr. Taylor and I said, hey, look, this is what I found at NRO. It sounds like that's what you're talking about. And he was nodding his head. What's my point here? It could mean that there's no core group, but rather they're pulling assets from all these different corners of branches and agencies. And I get it. I mean, I would hope that that's not the case with Arrow, because I think that they have a little bit more sunshine on them. There's a little bit more spotlight, a little bit more money. So hopefully it's a little bit more structured. But if it is that way again, it wouldn't surprise me, because that's kind of how it's been. And Luis Elizondo may disagree with me, but kind of sounds like how ATIP may have been also, just people that have their core job, and then we're kind of doing some stuff on the side.
Yeah, a little hobby effort. I say that in jest, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't,
but
I'm sure some people get insulted that you just called it a hobby, but I think you're accurate though. Like I think that's an accurate way to put it.
Now, there's another interesting part to this though, where a couple of years ago we had Marco Rubio being stopped in airports and being questioned by TMZ, right? Or whatever. There was a lot of Gillibrand, and there was a lot of action going on the Hill, and you felt that this was a subject that everybody was aware of, and this was moving forward. We had the UAP task force report. Of course, we had the hearing a few months ago too, as well. Things have simmered down. Right. Yeah. It's not like it was before. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm not sure.
John, we have zero leaks. How many leaks do you have over the last 2 years?
You're absolutely right. And I mean, I said this a week or two ago, and of course, the normal groups come after me for saying it, but I feel that the congressional interest is waning. The blowback that I got was, well, it's election, it's the midterms, they just don't, they have something to focus on. They don't care about the UAP report. And that's fair, but midterms are over. I still don't see anything. And to go to what you said, you're absolutely right. The run up to the June report, we had leak after leak after leak. It's like somebody turned the faucet on and just let this stuff, drip out, pour out.
How many phone calls did you and I have back then? Okay, what'd you hear today? Well, I heard this. Well, this is what I got. And we did that constantly, John. That's gone now.
Yeah, there's really kind of nothing. There's no leaks that I'm aware of. There's no new videos. There's no new photos. It's rather snoozy on that front. So the question mark is why? What happened to all of those sources that people had that were leaking this material and making a big deal out of it last year. I'm not knocking on those who published that material. Rather, I've long given them a lot of credit since day one, because they're one of the very few quote unquote leaks with anonymous sources that I've complimented, because the government admitted, yes, those are real. Those are real videos. We've used them in the UAP task force. They wouldn't tell me if they were unidentified or not, but regardless, it was like it checked out. And where are those sources that wanted to keep leaking that information? The media was, as you noted, asking question after question. TMZ doing those man on the streets, running up to Congress people on the street, going, "What do you think about UAPs? What about UFOs?" None of that is going on. So, is the media to blame for that? I don't think so. And the reason I say that is, any UFO thing happens still gets a lot of attention right now. It's just that sadly, there's not a whole lot of stuff happening. So the media is right there to catch the ball and report on UFO related stuff, but nothing is happening. So that's why I fell back and defaulted to, this seems like a waning of congressional interest that is not a popular thing to say. Trust me, I'll get hate mail for saying it, but there's no push right now. Because in my opinion, again, midterms are over. So let's just get beyond that for a second. Those that were really interested in this can make a phone call, even make their aides make that phone call and start pressuring. Or is that pressure going on? Maybe. But I would think if that pressure was going on, ODNI would have that report out. So my question is, did ODNI pick up the phone, call whatever congressional committee aide or staffer or whomever and say, "Hey, by the way, guys, sorry, October 31st, our deadline, but we're going to be late, so expect it in a few weeks." Other end goes, "Yeah, all right, who cares?" and hangs up, and that's it. Everybody's happy, and this is all normal. Except now UFO Twitter and the general public starts making every conspiracy in a book and making this a much bigger issue. I don't know if that's true or not, but my whole point is we have no idea what's going on. So on Monday of this week, one of my last follow-ups with ODNI is I asked them that direct question. So instead of saying, "What's the date of the report? Can you confirm this? Can you deny that?" No. It was Congress aware that this report was going to be late? Was there some kind of communication just to alert them? That's it. That's all I wanted to get. And I still cannot get a response. So what does it mean? I'm not sure. But I can tell you that once it drops, the amount of cases that I can file will answer all those questions, whether they want me to or not.
Here is, let me pop this up for you so you can check this out. Here is your letter that you received. It says right there at the top, Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That's got to make you tighten up just a little bit. And this is dated November 16th. That's last week. Take us through this, and why is it so significant?
Yeah, so there were a lot of rumors, and again, everybody's got sources and this and that. I try and get you the most accurate story possible. This was the first time that they put in writing that the report was not delivered. Why I'm saying that is there were some rumors that were going around that said that the classified version was delivered on time. And I don't need to put anybody's name out there, but there are names that you would recognize that put that definitively out there, and it was inaccurate. So this was the first time with a source, with a case number that showed that the report had not been provided to Congress. Now, I don't like nitpicking too much, but I will note one thing. The highlight that I put as of the date of this communication, the report has not yet been provided to Congress. The next line, given that we expect the final report to be provided in short order, we have opened this case in a hold status and will begin processing your request once the report has been conveyed to the Hill. There's a couple things that I feel you can glean from that. Number one, the first line says report. The second line says final report. Mm-hmm. To me, from a legal standpoint, that tells me there's drafts floating around.
And that's it's an out. It's an out, right?
Well, it shows me that there is a product created, meaning the report. So they have something. The report just hasn't been given over. Why? Because it's not final yet.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. The out is the word final, right? There may be
Correct.
a report, but it's not the final report.
But it's not final and has not been provided to Congress, which again goes to your previous question of, do I think something was drafted? Yes, I believe evidence points to not only just, secret conversations or whatever people have, but rather this is in writing. In addition, if a report is not made, I would be highly doubtful that anybody from ODNI would put on official letterhead that a report is going to be delivered in short order. So why would they do that if the report didn't even exist? They're locking themselves into a corner if they have no product whatsoever, product meaning report. So they have no product, but then they tell somebody with a legal case, it'll be delivered in short order, so we'll file your case and keep it on a hold status until it gets delivered. I don't see that happening. For those that care, from that legal standpoint, if something is in draft but maybe 6 months out from being delivered, they'll reject it under Exemption B5. And what Exemption B5 is in plain English is internal deliberation. Any draft document they consider a internal deliberative working product, so it's exempt from FOIA. And the moment it goes final, that is FOIA-able. It may fit into different exemptions, but not B5 as a draft. So there's a lot of, again, legal jargon going on here, but I think that there's a product. I think there's drafts, maybe multiple drafts. And hopefully, if their letter is true, it will be delivered here hopefully soon.
The press conferences over the last few years with many representatives, either from the Department of Defense or from the White House directly, had pages in their binders. John, yeah. They had pages. They had pages in the binders. Question comes up, UAP, they go to the U's, they flip open the binder, and they've got a response. Over the last month, you and I have both seen some of the responses at those press conferences, and those pages are missing from those binders. Nobody's got any information at all.
Yes, and that may just be because there's not much to report on those pages. I was going to try and pull it up quickly for you to share, but I don't want to waste too much time. But I got those, what they're called briefing cards for the spokespeople, and those briefing cards take all the approved language that they can use and talk about all the different talking points. That was the 2021 UAP task force briefing card. There was another one for the UAP report and a couple select others. I have all of them, which I can send you the link, or maybe during your break. I forget what time it is, but I'll pull up the URL and tweet it out. Now to 2021, I'm not sure what the explanation is. They may still have them internally, but most of the spokespeople that are fielding the questions, and credit to the journalists that are brave enough to ask, there's only a few, but in the Pentagon briefing room, there's nothing to reference because they have nothing to add. And so they're just saying like, oh yeah, we don't know why the report's late. You got to take it up to ODNI. That was the last Pentagon briefing that I'm aware of where UAP came up, where the deputy spokesperson for the Pentagon, she had said, as far as I know, ODNI still has the report. And what that does is essentially shuts off any ability for her to comment. And so that, for me anyway, was her out. That was sorry, ODNI has it, so you have to get a comment from ODNI because it's out of her purview. She can't comment on it, just like a White House spokesperson can't comment on State Department issues and vice versa. So those spokespeople are the voice of that agency, and the minute it goes to another agency, they're out. And so I think that those briefing cards, there's nothing in the binders because there's absolutely nothing there. They're just saying, hey, sorry, no comment. We're just waiting for the report. I'm not familiar with like ODNI briefings. I'm not familiar with how those work, if at all, if they have briefings like State Department and so on. I'm just, again, a lot of those other agencies, if they do have briefings, they're generally not recorded. like the Pentagon briefings are. You can access those videos a lot of times. Obviously, the news broadcasts, the White House ones, but ODNI I'm not real familiar with. But regardless, there's zero on the record statement that I've seen from anybody at ODNI on UAP related issue. So at this point, there's nothing in the binders because there's just nothing.
Why do you think there seems to be a thumbing at the nose about the mandate of October 31st? And it doesn't seem like there's any responsibility there, that, there isn't any. It seemed like the verbiage the nounage, right? The wordage about that was that it was law, that this was now law. October 31st, this date is law. This is a requirement. Well, it seems like nobody cares, because that date came and went, and there was no response back to the public or to Congress about why this date was missed.
Yeah, I think it's clearly a mandated report, and I think that's the most accurate word to describe what's going on, is that it is mandated to be delivered on October 31st. Where we're left to speculate is why it's not here. Is there a disregard for that mandate? Do they just say, who cares what Congress wants?
It's UFOs,
Yeah, I mean, can we say that? No, because we have nothing to gauge that on. I bring up that, did somebody call the congressional committees and just say, hey, just a heads up, we're really sorry, but we're kind of behind, and we're 2 weeks out.
That would leak. That would leak, because there's a political advantage there for somebody, right? And that kind of stuff would leak out. That's why.
Yeah.
Because Washington is nothing but leaks and rumors, right? And in this instance, John, we've got nothing, where we used to have a lot of it. There's plenty of leaks coming out of Washington, D.C. on other issues. Everybody's talking and jockeying for a position. This time around, there's absolutely nothing, which says to me, maybe there's not a report. Maybe there's nothing going on. Maybe nobody cares. Maybe. And I know it's a Pandora's box that I'm opening here, but I can't help but feel that way.
Well, I think I go to the New York Times Julian Barnes article, wherein he's clearly a established reporter. I've had my fair share of videos and strikes against the New York Times as a media outlet and how they've reported on this topic. But for Julian Barnes to report on something that doesn't exist and have some very specific details, I don't buy it. I believe that whomever his source was, and this is just a guess, that whomever his source was had a draft that internally they believed was going to go to press accordingly, essentially. That it was essentially final. They were going to, dot some T's and cross some I's or whatever, but they were going to finish it up. And they were going to send it over to the Hill. They give Julian Barnes the heads up, give some essential talking points and line items from the report that weren't classified. Julian Barnes turns around. He reports what he does in the New York Times, and UFO Twitter goes nuts. Why I'm bringing up that is to think that somebody like him at the New York Times, again, even with my criticism that's pretty palpable over the last few years, for him to report on something that didn't exist, I don't buy it. So I think he saw something. What he has to account for is when, I don't think it's if, I think it's when this report drops to the public. And what he reported on is not in that report. We have some questions.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
So,
and is it misinformation? Is it disinformation?
On whose part, though?
Let me finish. Is it something that he saw, or was it something that he was told? Two different things. And did he jump the gun? And certainly in that article, you're right. He better be right, because he seriously implied that this report was going to point the finger at China, and that this is a terrestrial thing, which is the exact opposite of the last UAP task force report, which clearly stated everything but that. So that's where I'm going. Was it misinformation and disinformation? There were a few media outlets that had a different story too as well, that weren't even close to what Julian was writing about. And they were talking about they were tipped off too. And it turns out that nobody knew anything.
I would say, what's funny is that if you read both articles, there was one in the Daily Mail, which is, I think, what you're referring to.
Right.
And you juxtapose that with the New York Times. They could have very well seen the exact same thing and reported on the exact same thing, but had their respective spin. And you have Julian Barnes, who's obviously not respecting this topic whatsoever. A lot of people jumped on him for that. Whatever. I don't care. I'm used to it. If it's accurate, fine. If it's dripping with bias, then I'll call it out. It was clear that he just doesn't have a respect for this, but he could be doing a straightforward reporting. Note that he used the word many that could be attributed to Chinese drones or whatever the way he worded it, but the key word being many. He didn't say all. So what does many mean, right? So now we got to get into semantics. What does Julian Barnes mean by many? 50%, 75%, 95%, 1%? What does that mean? And we don't have the answer to that. In the same respect, you looked at the Daily Mail. They could have seen the exact same either talking points or maybe a draft report leaked. We don't know. Journalists aren't going to give up their sources or how they got it or in what way or whatever. And that's fine. But whatever they saw, the Daily Mail is going to spin it kind of an opposite direction. That instead of focusing on the many are Chinese platforms or whatever, they're going to focus on the other part that's not part of the many. And what is the percentage? We don't know. If I were to guess, it's about 50%. If they come out and say that they've investigated X number of cases and roughly 50% are explainable, I will consider that a fascinating development, not because 50% are explainable, but rather 50% are unexplainable. I would even take a 75-25% split, because when you look at the public realm, and we'll call it open source intelligence, you look at all of that. Is it really 25% truly unidentified cases out there? No, it's a very small percentage. Anybody who really looks at this with common sense sees that it's in probably the single digits of 2%. Cases.
Yeah.
What's that?
2%.
I would buy that.
Yeah.
Right. So if the government comes out and they say it's 90, we've explained 95% of everything that's going on. People like Julian Barnes are going to say many of them are explainable, nothing to see here. But that's still fascinating because you have 5% of the cases that are not explainable. I'm making up these numbers before anybody quotes me. I'm just using them as an example that, we don't know what these guys saw, but they could have seen the exact same thing, but reported it with their respective bias or spin or whatever you want to call it. Because as we know, the Daily Mail is not the number one most accurate media outlet out there. I don't want to trash it. They've profiled the Black Vault before, so
I respect the kindness. I do.
Yeah, but it's sensationalized. We all know that. New York Times a little bit more, arguably straight-laced and more grounded.
Yeah.
But you look at that, and they could have very well seen the same thing, just with respective spin.
I don't think anybody saw anything. I'm going on the record right now. I'm saying with utter confidence that the Daily Mail in the United Kingdom was not leaked any information. Period. Maybe somebody put something in somebody's ear. I'm not going to say, and I'm going back to my misinfo, disinfo comment from earlier. That I think is a huge possibility here. Trying to throw stuff out there and getting people to leak this into social media or hopefully get it out into a media outlet. But did the Daily Mail get a draft of the UAP report? No. Impossible. A foreign government? No, it didn't. It just didn't happen.
And I can buy the not getting a full draft, but rather talking points from a source I could buy, because there were enough similarities, I feel anyway. It's been a couple weeks since I've read it, but I felt that there was enough similarities that maybe the talking points, the bigger line items, the bigger conclusions from the report were conveyed to the journalists, and they reported them respectively. I would buy that versus they got a draft. So I agree with you there, but it would be very hard for me to think that they would report on something like that with that amount of detail if they weren't able to confirm at least a little bit that was going to be in that draft.
Except for one key word, though, my friend: clicks.
Yeah, but so I'll push back on that. The New York Times, I feel, could absolutely have spun it the Daily Mail way and probably got 10 times the traffic, if not more. I mean, you look at their reporting that the Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kean articles, Helene Cooper on some of them, those that are definitely what we would consider more pro UFO, the amount of clicks that they are getting, hands down, are going to be astronomically higher than what Julian Barnes did. So the question mark is, not the question mark. My rebuttal would be, you can't really argue the click angle just simply because I think you're shooting yourself in the foot, unless they're trying to get we'll call it reputation back of trying to report on this somewhat more grounded.
Yeah,
more objectively.
And now here's my spin, and I want your opinion as quick as possible. I feel that Julian's article was assuming the report was going to drop in a day or two. And this was the foreshadowing, right? This was your little salvo out there. And they were banking on that report coming out in a couple of days. That's the way I read through that and felt, because Julian, as opposed to Blumenthal and Kean and others, that was all based on quoted sources, names in print, vetted material, and the blowing up of this UFO group at the Pentagon. Right? That was a different. Julian's article didn't have any of that. All right, so there was no quoted sources. It wasn't based on anything. No, there wasn't anything there. Daily Mail, they do. Elvis's wife had an alien baby, that's a whole, their editorial standards are a little bit different with the Daily Mail. That's great. They can do what they want, but two different vibes there. So I feel that Julian's article was written because they assumed that report was going to drop in a day or two, hence the clicks.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. So then the question mark is, who is that source that went to Julian Barnes and said, okay, here are the talking points, or, whatever, however that unfolded. My other big question that I'll just throw out there is the New York Times, with their previous reporting, had talked about these off-world vehicles. They quoted Dr. Eric Davis, and that particular article was a mess, by the way. That was one video that I made, and they had so many corrections on top of corrections that weren't even noted in the article. But my whole point here is that it was not an op-ed. It was published by the New York Times and is still available. And those claims are still made by one of their named sources. So I would think that the same media outlet, like the New York Times, if Julian Barnes comes along and essentially negates their own reporting, that should be addressed. I just don't think you can drastically change your views on as a media outlet, and maybe views are the wrong word. But my whole point here is that if you have journalists that are working for a media outlet and they're unbiased and just giving you the news, they should somewhat be in the same ballpark with their reporting, right? Unless it's an op-ed. An op-ed is a totally different ball game. You put your opinions out there. That's something different. But when you look at the articles, and they were straightforward articles, some of which appeared on the cover, the front page of the New York Times, when you look at that, and then now you've got Julian Barnes come in and say, well, it's primarily foreign foreign technology and spy equipment and stuff like that. What happened to those claims by the same media outlet that used a vetted source, according to them, they vetted the sources, a vetted source talking about off-world vehicles? How did they go hand in hand? And they don't.
Yeah. They and here's the thing: do we put Julian Barnes's article in the op-ed category? Because I'm glad that you brought that up, because it leans in that direction, as opposed to Kane and Blumenthal are reporting the facts and the report. It's two different things here. And I felt that, and I said this on the air that night, John, after reading Julian's article, that it was an opinion piece. This is his opinion. He's not basing anything on fact. And it's going in direct contrast with the previous report and everything else that has come out in the past. It's the exact opposite. Remember, the UAP Task Force report said, it's not our adversaries. We know it's not Russia. We know it's not China. We know it's not us. That's what the report said. We have an other Ben here. We're going to lump everything into there. But right now, we can tell you it's not Russia. It's not China. It's not us. That's the report. Now Julian is saying the opposite. It's China. And it's like, there's no way that report is going to come out and say that. It's just not. So he's basing it on opinion. There's no way that it was based on fact.
Well, in respect to the first report, I don't think that it necessarily said it is clearly not China, not Russia, not Iran, not any of these countries, but rather they didn't have the adequate evidence to put it into any category, hence why 143 out of the 144 remained unidentified. So I wouldn't say it was that definitive dismissing foreign technology. But in the same respect, going back to what you were saying about the op-ed, this is not meant to be disrespectful at all to either Leslie Kean or Ralph Blumenthal, but you can absolutely reverse what you just said, and it would still fit. Even though they named Dr. Eric Davis as the source, that is the only one when they were talking about off-world vehicles and all of that reporting. The rest was all anonymous. They had Harry Reid in there supporting it, but they essentially retracted all that because Harry Reid, you could tell by the tweet, was furious that he was listed as saying what he was printed as saying. So they had to pull it back. They had to pull all that back. So right now, all you have is an article claiming a humanity-changing piece of information that vehicles not made on this planet, off-world vehicles, have crashed here or being retrieved or being worked on, whatever the article was essentially saying or claiming, with absolutely nothing to back it up. So is that his opinion that was conveyed to those two journalists, and they put it out there as fact, but when in reality it was opinion? No, so
that's not what Ralph told me. What Ralph stated on this show, he said, Jimmy, it's the New York Times. We had that, and we put it down at the bottom of the article for a reason. That quote was vetted 3 times.
Which quote are you talking about? The one from Eric Davis?
Yes.
Well, you can vet a quote. I mean, I have no doubt that Eric Davis said it, but is Ralph Blumenthal going to go on the record that says he saw proof of off-world vehicles?
I pushed Ralph pretty hard on that. I wanted to know if the Senate, if they went to the Senate and tried to vet this information. Not that he said it, but that was this a concern? I mean, if you're going to put that in writing, you're right. That's a paradigm shifting, world history shifting. That's a big deal quote.
Right.
And my other concern with that, before we're going to do a break, but we don't have to do the break on time. You know, it's a kindler.
That's what's nice about your new format.
Fade to black. Yeah. Is that they intentionally buried it in the article, Ralph said. He said they didn't want to lead off with that because that would be the focus of the article.
That should be the focus. I don't mean to step on you,
but no,
that changes humanity.
That's what I said to Ralph. That's what I said to Ralph.
And I'm only laughing and making light of it because that makes no sense to me. If a journalist can truly not vet the quote, vet the information, and I go to a journalist and I say, Journalist A, I have proof of off-world vehicles, and that journalist comes to me, says, show me the proof, and I show it. That's life-changing, humanity-changing information. For them to bury it, in my opinion, means they didn't have anything but a vetted quote. And sure, Eric Davis puts his name to it. Good for him. I think that's great. But one of the things I'm going back to this interview because Dr. Travis Taylor is a highly cleared, working in multiple classified arenas that is easily proven. That's not an unfounded claim. That's easily proven, and he's been that way for a long time. And I specifically asked him about information that is inherently classified just by the mere existence of it or mention of it. And he, as a clearance holder, agreed that you just can't go around talking about things that would be inherently classified, like the existence of alien spacecraft, off-world vehicles, and so on. So there's so much wrong with the claim just from the get-go. But then on top of that, for a journalist to come back and say, well, we buried it because we didn't want that to be the focus. Mm-hmm. Respectfully, Ralph, that should be the focus. That, if you can vet that and you put the New York Times masthead at the top, I'm pretty impressed. Yeah, right. If they could prove it, but I don't think they could.
No doubt. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, the one and only John Greenewald. I've got to get this in. So let's get it in right now. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And, hold on. Let me pull John back. Hey, John.
Like I wasn't drinking my water.
Yeah, I know. Everywhere. Check this out. I didn't have the video loaded. So I've got to go here. I've got to go here. I've got to go here. And there it is. See, you just saw it pop up. All right. We'll be right back after this short break. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. And we'll be right back. Check out Billy Carson's Forbidden Knowledge. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv, where you can get access to over 6,000 videos, movies, TV series, exclusive documentaries like the Black Knight Satellite. You can do it all for just $7.77 per month or $77 per year after the 3-day trial, which is also totally free to check out. It's all simple to do. Billy Carson is the best. It's simple. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's the number 4BK. I will be hosting and emceeing the Conscious Life Expo this February 10th through the 13th at the LAX Hilton right here in Los Angeles, California. 200 speakers, including Linda Moulton Howe, Bashar, Deborah King, George Norrie, Daniel Sheehan, Scott Walter Johnstone, and David Wolf. Over 200 vendors, special events. This is the biggest event of its kind on planet Earth. You've got to come and hang out with all of us. Tickets and info at ConsciousLifeExpo.com. The links are below. On Saturday, April 1st, that's right, April Fool's Day, 2023, I will be hosting the Parapod Festival at the Hyatt Regency right here in Valencia, California. It's a live one-day podcast awards. It's a film festival. It's a full-on media event. We're going to have sky watching. There's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Linda Moulton Howe. Right now, you can submit your podcast, your film, your TV series, any of your paranormal media for consideration. You can do all of that on the links below. For info and tickets, go to parapodfilmfest.com. That's parapodfilmfest.com. April 7th through the 14th, 2023, I'll be hosting and presenting on the Hidden Secrets Seminar at Sea Cruise. From Los Angeles to the Mexican Riviera on the Navigator of the Seas. That's right, up top, a giant water slide. You've got to check out the Navigator of the Seas. It's amazing. We've got Scott Walter, Adam Apollo, Nick Pope, Brad Olson, Vivian Chauvet, Jason Shurka, Robert Grant, Ruben Langdon, and another 12 amazing speakers and presenters. It's all simple to do. Just visit divinetravels.com/Hidden Secrets 2023. You know you want to go on a cruise with me. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, John Greenewald is with us. And before that short break, John, we were talking about Travis Taylor. And there were, if you don't mind, everybody can go to your YouTube channel, and I'm sure it's up on the Black Vault, right? It's there on the website. Oh, you're muted. What? Unmute yourself.
Do you need audio during these programs? Sorry about that.
I need usually audio more than your Black Vault shirt. I can.
Yes. Well, this is a must. No, the easy way to get to that channel, theblackvault.com/live, and that will forward you over to the channel. Okay, great. A lot of people have been talking about that interview today. And specifically, and I don't want to, kick a dead horse here, but out of all of his comments, I saw, oh man, I hate to say the name out loud, Mick West, he had to jump in, and we can circle back to that. But his comments about Bob Lazar, the community, Lazar is a name that once it pops up, people are going to express their opinion, and they're always interested in all things Lazar. What was your takeaway from Travis's comments? I highly respect what he was saying, and the reason why I say it that way is that he's not just jumping on the bandwagon because by him supporting someone like Lazar or throwing the story a bone and giving it some credence would actually help someone like Dr. Travis Taylor, if you know his views and you see the way my interview went with him, it would essentially help support a few things. But I think that the problem that I've had with Lazar's story for a long time, the problem that a lot of other people have with his story for a long time, are what Dr. Taylor has with his story, that you just don't get into the positions that you are in with that type of educational background ? And I know for some that's a very dated argument for Lazar, that he's not able to prove his educational background. But I'm sorry, all evidence points to, if you're going to be working on these highly classified programs, you're going to have some type of educational background to justify you being there. Now, I know a lot of people have kind of, I think, forgiven him for that maybe he lied his way in there or lied to be a little bit more impressive than he really was. Whatever. It doesn't matter. That's only one piece of the puzzle. And so to hear Dr. Taylor talk about that, I think was very admirable. I think he spoke with a lot of candor during our interview. I think that he was very honest with his answers. When he couldn't answer, he said so. But I think that his response to Lazar is somebody that is speaking from history with knowledge about classified arenas, talking about security clearances, educational backgrounds, getting into those arenas and working. You're not just any Joe Schmo when you're at that level. To close the thought, I had also again brought up that fact to Dr. Taylor. Of the information just being inherently classified, that you can't just go around and start talking about this kind of stuff and like nothing happens. And when you have information conveyed to the public, like let's say the FBI raid, and giving credence that they were looking for element 115, this was in Jeremy Corbell's documentary. But when you look at the actual police records, that they were looking for something else, and it was
a murder investigation.
It was a murder investigation, right? Yeah. All of that kind of stuff just doesn't help, and it just has piled up. So yeah, he's going to get heat for that, but you know what? I support him saying it. I think you should really respect that viewpoint. It doesn't mean that we all have to agree with everything that he says, even on Lazar. There's going to be people out there that still believe Lazar's story, but I respect somebody who can speak honestly about it and give their opinion. So I give him a lot of props for that.
Well, you and I are from the Valley, okay? And most listening to the show, the only reference to the Valley is Valley Girl or something by Frank Zappa or the movie. And they don't understand what the Valley represents. But when you're from the Valley, like you and I are, we know everything that's going on here, and we all know Pierce College, right? and Pierce College is great, technical community college, pretty cool campus and stuff. But that's what it is, and I don't see, and I could be wrong here, how you go from that to MIT and Caltech on short order and get, as Lazar said, advanced degrees in physics.
Yeah.
Without friends, other physicists, and I think it's a disrespect to the physics community where physicists around the world, they all know each other.
Yeah.
They're reading their papers. They're watching their research. They are friends. They share information. This is to be a physicist. It's a rare thing. There's not that many physicists on planet Earth. I've looked up the numbers. It's not that big, but they all know each other. And to say that you're this and you're this and you're this, and to have not anybody come out and say, yeah, we worked on a project together. We did a research paper together. We did this together, but that hasn't happened. Any other physicist can show you that piles deep. And that's the issue that I've always had, is there's just nothing out there to support it. Not as school records, just another physicist.
Yeah. Well, I think all of that aside, the introduction of what I would consider a faked document in the form of a W-2, and he made a very common error, especially in that time frame, that he put on a W-2 form, Department of Naval Intelligence. Now, this is actually a somewhat common mistake. Somebody might hear that and go, yeah, there is a Department of Naval Intelligence, and it still exists today. And what's the problem with that? Well, it's not a department, it's an office, the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI. And that may sound like a very small error, but when you look at it, that was a very common mistake. So I think when whomever created this what I would consider fake document, they put that error on there because they didn't know any better. The Department of Naval Intelligence has never existed. The Office of Naval Intelligence is under the Department of the Navy. So we're talking about two different things. Departments as a whole, like the Department of State or the Defense Department or Department of Energy, those are independent departments of the United States government, and something that you can track back. And obviously there's ample evidence to support those departments exist. Nothing supports that the Department of Naval Intelligence exists. What does exist are errors. And some people, one researcher in particular, has kind of tried to rile that whole thing up, that he found proof of the Department of Naval Intelligence. And so I went back to him, and all he found was a finding aid. So these archives, like the National Archives, which is where he found it, listed Department of Naval Intelligence. And I said, hey, well, these finding aids are really inaccurate a lot of times. I mean, I have ample proof of that. But I said, great find. Love that you're doing the work. Why don't you just give the National Archives a call and have them pull those boxes that the finding aid is pointing to, and see if the Department of Naval Intelligence is in there. If it is, you got yourself a gold mine. But I would bet money that they made a mistake in the finding aid, because a lot of times they're interns that go in and they just go through a bunch of boxes and they make finding aids. So people like me can go in and go, oh, okay, here's information from 1975 from whatever agency on whatever topic, so those finding aids can be very useful, but again, not always accurate. And that person got very angry at me and ended up blocking me because another researcher by the name of Dean Johnson, who follows a lot of this stuff and Bob Lazar's story, got in writing a source from the U.S. Navy, a historian, that said the Department of Naval Intelligence never existed. So there's ample evidence to show that it didn't exist, while others are trying to make it exist but can't show any proof. And if you question it, they pretty much just kind of shut you down and don't want to listen. So going back to why I'm bringing up this story is when you introduce a fake document to the story, you have really lost a lot of credibility in my book. If you came to me with a story like this and the only issue was education, sure, I'd look at it. I'd still have my questions, but that's just the education part. But when you add in the fake document, when you add in the issue about security clearances and all of that stuff that has piled up over the years, it's too much in my book. It really is.
Here's the strange part, and I'm going to admit to this, that from the beginning, when some of these, I'm talking about, going into the 80s and the 90s, when it came to Lazar, that I suffered from cognitive dissonance. I allowed myself to ignore everything. I was all in on Lazar. My chips were in, and I believed him. And going back to Lear and the original videos and him jumping out of his Corvette, remember that, slamming the door? Hi, I'm Bob Lazar.
Yes,
and
the old VHS video.
Yeah. I love those videos, man.
Yeah.
I watched him constantly, and with him on the whiteboard, remember that? And
Yep.
and going through his thing, and the little alien presentation in the military tent, all of that stuff. And I was trying to get him to slip up. Right. And I was like, no, I'm pretty confident he's on point here. Everything else, I had the blinders on, and the evidence was there. I wouldn't listen to it. I didn't care. And that today, Bob still has that support. Maybe he did go out to Area 51. Maybe he did. Maybe he got on the Janet airline. Maybe he did fly out there 2 or 3 or 4 times. And then he just got caught up in it, and these things about MIT and Caltech and sport models and 115. This just, it got away from him, because he was a rock star,
Yeah.
And
I think that goes to a lot of people's head when you come out with a story like that, especially pre-internet, really. And he was, like you said, a rock star. I truly believe that maybe after all these years, and this isn't a knock on him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he could even pass a lie detector test, because I think that he's told the story so many times and maybe even believes it. But the question is, why did it start in the first place? Because I don't believe that it happened. I believe that if there were alien saucers that were being reverse engineered, anybody that was working on that, you would never hear their name, ever. You wouldn't hear them in a silhouetted interview. You wouldn't hear their name that came out after. You wouldn't see them do conferences. You wouldn't see them sell books. You wouldn't see them in documentaries on Netflix. Nothing. I truly believe that. I don't believe that people like that would come out into the open. What I do believe is likely the story is he probably did have some kind of work. He probably did go to Area 51. He probably did work for, what was it, Kirk Meyer, the contractor.
Los Alamos. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's elements to the story that are likely true. Mm-hmm. But all of these other ones that, again, just if you look at it from a common sense standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. Because if somebody like that, and again, I'll nutshell this because I don't want to take, well, however much time you want to spend. It's your show, Jimmy. But
it's yours, obviously.
The point that I'm trying to make is that if somebody has that knowledge and they're working on that at that time frame, I believe the number of people that would have that knowledge would be small. Right. I don't think there's going to be thousands of people at like a Palmdale plant like present day, but rather it would be very small. You would keep that knowledge very tight because you're talking about world changing, highly classified information that could change everything on this planet. So I think you're going to keep that very, very tight. And if somebody like that starts talking to the media, I believe that they, meaning the government, those that were trying to keep that secret, would know. If you popped up on a silhouetted interview, they would know. And once you do that, the list of people that would be to blame would be so small that I think that they could easily peg whomever that person was. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, nobody shut it down. Nobody cared to shut it down. You have the legal issues that Bob Lazar got into outside of all of this talk, which I won't mention here, but you have that that problem he had with the law a couple times throughout the years. And you start looking at it that you're not going to be that guy anymore if that's who you were. I believe you would be locked away. And you have numerous examples over the decades of people that have taken classified information and put it out into the open, whether that be for transparency, so the greater masses can understand what's really going on, and the Snowden leaks and so on. You look at all the WikiLeaks stuff that has come out, but even prior to that, people taking classified information. Where are they? They're either in jail, locked up, or in holes somewhere, hiding in other countries where they can't be extradited. Right? They're not running a fireworks manufacturing company or running a .com selling chemicals, or selling T-shirts and appearing at conferences. That's not who they are. So to me, there's just way too much that doesn't match up, and you have real world examples to compare on why it doesn't match up. Yeah.
And not to, again, I agree with you, not to continue on with the story, because I was all in on Bob. What made me pull back on Bob was that little thing in the film and the FBI raid and that it's strong insinuation that was about Element 115 when clearly that wasn't the case, and Lazar knew that. And at the time, he knew. Yeah. And it's a search warrant. We're looking for this receipt for this element. We're in a murder investigation. Somebody was poisoned by a rare earth element, and we need to come in here and find this paperwork. He knew. It was, and to imply that, that's what made me back off, man. It just didn't sit right with me. But here's the thing. When Bob first started making these statements, how did he know about the UFOs when they were flying, right? That was pretty interesting, right? The test flights. That was pretty interesting. And it's something that people still hang their hat on today. I get that, right? But to describe S4 and Papoose Lake and on a bus, guard shacks, right? All of this and the hangar doors on the side. And what he didn't bank on was that one day we would have something called Google Earth, right? He didn't bank on that. And you could go and you show me a dirt road, let alone a paved road. Show me tire tracks. Show me anything. I have looked and scoured through every photograph everywhere, and there's nothing. It doesn't exist. So he didn't know. Nobody knew, back then that we would have this kind of ability today to go and look at any of this. And it's simply not there. So, yeah, again, I had cognitive dissonance, man. I was a victim of it. I had it. I was diseased, John. I wouldn't listen to anything.
It's easy to let happen, especially with it's a legend, right? And he is a legend. There's no going away from the fact that his name will live on for decades and decades still, right? Despite all the evidence to the contrary that his story is likely and primarily bunk, he will add to this field by name for a long time. He will live on, is where I'm going with that.
Part of me wants it all to be true, man.
Me too. Why not? The world changes. This is what I don't get, where some people that if you're skeptical about something, it's like you're trying to squash disclosure. When people don't realize, I am a full supporter that if someone like Bob Lazar comes out and that story is true and provable, that changes humanity. Who wouldn't want that? Because that opens up so many more doors that you can start knocking on and trying to figure out what else is there and so on and so forth. And some of the arguments pushing back on that skepticism just don't make sense whatsoever. Plain and simple, if it were true, and I wish it were, it would change humanity. Like, why wouldn't we want that? And that's what I don't understand, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. Not to now. Okay, back to Travis Taylor, where TT, Travis. I think he's a very likable guy. He's very well spoken, and he's credentialed, and he's got all of that going for him, right? There's another part of Travis where, to me, this is just an observation. He seems to be everywhere, every man, all the time, right? He's like every man's everywhere all the time, dude. He's on all the TV shows. He's on all the conferences. He's knowledgeable in all of the subjects. Has he been on Oak Island yet?
To be honest, well, you laugh. To be honest with you, I think so. But I to be honest with you, I don't know for sure.
I don't know either. But I'm just saying, and so, which I want to take this back to your point. Would somebody like that with knowledge be out in the public? So is Travis basing his belief system, which is religious, right, to believe in something, is it based on fact? Has he been read in? Has he seen something? Or is he just trying to scientifically prove this? Because I've got a lot of respect for the guy.
Yeah. What was fascinating with the interview was the fact that he wasn't making the explosive claims, that he wasn't coming to me saying, look, John, I can't tell you, but they're aliens, like he wasn't doing anything crazy like that. And in fact, towards the end of the interview, there was such a genuine answer from him that he said, out of everything that I look at, that he essentially was kind of leaning towards a extraterrestrial hypothesis, but he couldn't prove it. Now, I'm kind of paraphrasing there, but that's such a genuine way to frame it, because he's not coming to me with some kind of shrouded cloak and dagger type story that he's making these huge claims, but rather saying, look, I lean this way, but John, I can't 100% prove that to you. So I'm going to keep pushing in the ways that I know how. Now, again, I'm paraphrasing there, but it was such a genuine answer from him, and one that I was a little surprised at, because when you talk to people in positions like him, they love to make every answer a riddle, and you have to figure out, what exactly did he mean? And did he sniff a certain way? Did he sneeze as a secret code? And yes, there are people out there that read into others that are telling those stories, and it drives me nuts. Some people call them breadcrumbs, right? That's not what Travis Taylor did with me today. And yet again, I highly respect that, because he wasn't making these grandiose claims and shrouding it in cloak and dagger stuff to hint at this or hint at that. He was straightforward. He gave me the answers. And when I pushed into what was a classified realm, he would push back and say, I can't talk about that. Or when I pushed him on what his current company is doing in the private sector, and I kind of prodded him on that a little bit, he essentially had to close it off there, because he's not a spokesperson for the company. So I respect that. So where I'm going with it, going back to what you're asking, would he be out in the open? Well, if he was making these grandiose claims, then yes, I would make that argument that he wouldn't be all over television. But the fact remains is that he's not making those big claims. And on top of that, he's incredibly intelligent, not only just by the book. He's got 6 different degrees, 2 of which are doctorates, a few masters. He's incredibly by the book intelligent. But on top of that, he has a way to convey the message. And I'll give a quick story, one I told on my interview, but I wanted to say it here also.
Sure.
Dr. Travis and I crossed paths about 6-7 years ago, and I was brought in to produce and write a History Channel show that was all about the end of the world. And my particular episode was if aliens attacked Earth, how would they do it and why? And then who would win? So it was showing all these different disasters and how the world can end and could humanity survive. And my executives came to me, and I forget what show Dr. Taylor was doing at the time. I knew him by reputation. I had never met him before, but my executives, the big bosses, came to me and said, okay, John, look, you're going to do the show. We know that you're totally into the topic. I had a bunch of experts lined up, but they said, you have to talk to Dr. Travis Taylor. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I know that name. And he literally wrote a book about what I was talking about, and was just someone that they wanted on the show. Why? Because, again, he had that presence that was able to convey the message. So I don't think that it's a bad thing, and not that you were implying that, but other people say it. He's everywhere. He's on all these shows. What is he doing? This and that. And it's because he's a presence on camera, and he delivers, and he can essentially present to the camera well. And that, as a producer, that's what you look for, because if you interview somebody that's incredibly dry and they're just monotone, and when you ask them a question, they fade off, and that's horrible television. You don't want to do that. And so you find those people that can convey the message, and you stick with them. And Dr. Taylor was one of them. That's why you see him on all these different shows, because he's versed and can deliver.
I like Travis. He's somebody that I would sit down and have beers and tacos with, right? You could just tell it would be just a fun night, and he's full of knowledge. But everybody is just going at him. You saw what social media did today about the interview, about this comment about drones and flight time. And how inaccurate that was. And anybody that's a DJI, whatever, Mavic Mini, SE, anybody that's in the drone world knows about flight times and batteries today, let alone military drones are not out there flying for 15 minutes. They're flying for hours at a time. So what did we do with that kind of inaccuracy, or do you just think it was just a simple mistake?
Well, it could be any of what you just said. It could have been a mistake. I did not push back on the idea. It wasn't my intent to debate with him. Mm-hmm. But of course, Twitter and social media is really kind of attacking him on that. In fairness to Dr. Taylor, it could have absolutely have been either a misspeak, right, or potentially not specific enough. Again, we weren't in a debate, so it's not like he was sitting here going, all right, this model has this many minutes, this model has this many minutes, right, ergo you can't have this be that. It wasn't like that. I think it was a much quicker comment. So in fairness to him, it could have been a mistake and just a misspeak. Or on top of that, I saw a comment, and I'm not going to argue either way of what they meant, but I thought it was a very interesting perspective that somebody on Twitter, I think it was kind of going to his defense and was talking about the difference between a VTOL, or vertical takeoff on landing drone, versus a fixed wing drone, and the difference in battery and so on and so forth. I'm like, oh, okay, that's an element of this conversation that you just don't see. Somebody says, well, a battery can last 45 minutes. Well, in my opinion, it's just not that easy. You have to drill down, because like that commenter said, and it was something I had not thought of, are you talking about a VTOL drone? Are you talking about a fixed wing drone? There's a lot of other variables that maybe Dr. Taylor in his mind knew what he was referring to, but then everybody else just takes that one little snippet of what he said and attributes it to an inaccurate statement and goes, he's not credible. I think we should give him another shot to maybe explain, and it's up to him. I don't speak for him.
I don't think it's a big deal. And I'm not insinuating at all that you should have debated him on this point. No,
I didn't take it that way.
My approach to this is with somebody with a couple of doctorates and credentialed and knowledge, and we're talking about physics here, should have a basic knowledge of things and should have control of what they're thinking, and you can't be that factually off on something. All right. I don't own a drone. I don't. I do a lot of research into drones. I'm always looking on the web because I'm going to purchase one, right? So I'm looking at flight times, John. I'm looking at batteries. I'm looking at what's going on. I'm looking at videos. I'm trying to see. I'm looking at the reviews and the comments and what real flight time is when these claims of a manufacturer are saying you can get 30 minutes when you're only getting 20, right? I know these things. I'm not a PhD. And that's my point, why it would be that inaccurate or, so maybe it was just a mistake. That's the only thing.
Yeah, and again, it could be. I think in something like that, because I've heard myself in interviews before. I'm not a PhD. I'm not anything close to that when it comes to educational degrees. And you misspeak all the time. Not you, but me. When you do live interviews and you talk to somebody for an hour. And look, I'm not like a sweet interviewer where I just ask you what's your favorite color and do you like long walks on the beach? I mean, I'll dig, and he has to, in his mind, and again, I'm kind of guessing here, I'm not speaking or defending him in any way, but as somebody who's done quite a few interviews throughout the years in television and radio, he, on his side, he's got multiple NDAs, security clearances, and so on, and knows stuff that if he slips, he can get into a lot of trouble. And I've always respected even Luis Elizondo when he does interviews, Dr. Taylor, anybody with a security clearance. You have to balance that when somebody like me is asking you questions and pushing for every little tidbit of information. So did he misspeak on a battery flight length time? Maybe, I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me because, when you do these interviews on both sides of the interview, your mind is going 30 different places at once. And you're, on my side, you're trying to formulate the next question while listening to that one, seeing if it's worthy of a follow-up. Did you miss something that you want to go back to? What kind of hate mail are you going to get? And on his side, he's doing the same thing. What's John going to ask next? Do I want to cut off his question and maybe give an answer so he doesn't have to ask it? Let's make sure we don't go there because I have a security clearance. I'm working at a multi-million or whatever corporation. I can't make them look bad. So there's all this stuff going on everybody's brain. I think a fair resolution to this is we let him explain.
Yeah, and why is it? What you know what? And let's get to the root of the matter here. Why is it that we find ourselves today having to react to social media? That social media is so quick to attack. Social media is so quick. I mean, they just want to cancel whoever. They attack, and prove. Why are we there today, John? Why is that going on? And is it because? First off, why? Why is this happening? Why are you and I even talking about this? Number one. Number two, is it because we can't hear the voice behind somebody's comments? I got to tell you, Mick West, I think he's a likable guy. I've talked to him on the phone. I've interviewed him. I think he's a likable guy. He's like the most hated dude on Twitter, right? And nothing but attack. And I don't think people hear he picked apart a video that I posted, which I didn't care about. I just needed answers, right? And okay, all right. I'm not going to fight with the guy. It's out there, but people just want to attack. Why is it that we have to respond? And why should Travis be in a position to turn around and deal with a faux pas, a mistake, a misstatement, a misquote thing about battery life and a drone? How did we get here, man?
Sadly, that's just social media. It's been the evolution that I've seen from what were called IRC chat rooms way back in the day. Even prior to that were BBSs that you would dial up into and post messages on boards. When IRC came around, you were having these debates with people even back then, and that was decades ago. Fast forward, Twitter's just, a newer way to have these debates and throw shots at people because there's no human interaction. It's not like you and me talking. It's not like Dr. Taylor and I talking via these types of video chats, just having a good chat. Rather, some people out there find it easier to throw a 125 character insult at somebody hiding behind a keyboard And that's easy for them. And so they just throw it out there because they feel like that's their contribution. And it's very frustrating. And even Dr. Taylor brought it up today, saying that instead of this, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially this vitriol that's out there, this fighting and this like going head to head, that making this a team effort, tackling this together would be so much more beneficial than sitting here and going back and forth and doing these types of wars. And he's absolutely right. And when that interview aired, I mean, I kid you not, I'm surprised that people were stealing clips so fast. So they must have been sitting there like either just ripping as I was going, or I don't know. I mean, look, I'm a computer geek and I know how to rip these things pretty quick. But man, there were people that were like tweeting these video clips from my interview already. And then tonight I was seeing somebody was live streaming with it already, playing clips. And in the background, I'm like, God, it's not even a couple hours old, guys. Like, give it some time where people can digest it. But that is the world that we live in. It's quick. It's fast. People they want to put their reactions out there. Some are supportive. Some are combative. Some are just vicious. It doesn't matter, but that's who we are. And why do we have to respond? I mean, I find myself responding to insults and claims from people that have like 30 followers. And after I do it, I go, John, what the hell are you doing?
Why are you doing
that?
Why
does it matter? Like, what does it matter? But it makes me angry that people can do that and post it out there. So they may only have 30 followers, but they put it on my thread and make a, stupid claim or whatever about me. I just feel the need I have to respond, because it's wrong. But that's what some people, want to do, and that they feel that that's their contribution. So does Dr. Taylor have to address any of that? That's up to him. I only speak for myself. I've tried to really back out of responding to that hate and vitriol. And trust me, I get my fair share. It is not a popular take. Some of the takes that I have where you question a lot of things. Like that's what I do. I mean, I push and push and push for answers in every single piece of the puzzle I can get. And for some people, that's rocking the boat, and they don't like that, and they will attack me for it. And I've really tried to be better over the last year or two to just block them, get them out of my feed, and call it a day, and sometimes people will take screenshots. Oh, look what this guy's saying about you. And it's like, I really don't care, I mean, at that point you just have to back out, but that is the reality of the world that we live in. And we have to realize that those that are creating forums like this, creating content that's valuable, having these types of conversations, not only between you and me, but, others that are out there creating content and making that information available. That's what this is all about. And I have to remember that that's what we're doing. That's what our vision should remain. And if their vision is they're going to go and like type an insult and tweet at us, good job. Like, way to contribute, like what else do you want to do?
Right. And I figured out a long time ago, this is years ago. This wasn't in the last month. This is years ago, that I was allowing, and I saw it, I felt it, I was allowing social media to dictate my mood.
Yeah.
And wait a minute here. Wait. I'm in a great mood. Why, and getting sucked into it. Why do I need it to change me and my mood? No, I don't. No. I'll get off social media before I let any of that happen. And so what I decided, I'm not going to read it. There are people out there that do their thing, and I get that, whatever, but I don't see it, and I certainly don't care about it. It's not going to change my bliss or how I feel. I don't want that to happen to me. Now, before we close out tonight, talking about all of this, let's talk about Wilson Davis for a second. And the reason why I want to discuss this is you and I have talked. I keep saying privately to everybody, like John and I have some secret, relationship thing going on. But you and I have logged in many hours on the phone talking about Wilson Davis. And now one of the things, I've swung both ways on this document, a few times. I was involved from the very beginning, very beginning. And I feel responsible to some degree about bringing this out into the public, because I did just that with Fade to Black and Coast to Coast AM. And so, but the one thing that is different about Wilson Davis opposed to any other document, that includes what's on the Black Vault. Not any document on the Black Vault, but I'm saying it in a general sense. When it comes to the UFO topic, the Wilson Davis, for the first time, we've got real people, and Oak Shannon coming out and saying, yes, I did introduce Eric Davis to Admiral Wilson, and his voice, he literally stated these things. Now, at the same time, and we've never had that before. That had never happened with any MJ-12 document or Majestic document or anything else. And then his notes surface, and Jack Hout's notes surface. And you can start to cross-reference all of this versus Oak Shannon's own words. And suddenly we have a document that is standing on its own. How do you feel the same, that this is the first time that we've actually had a real credible like Oak Shannon, who his CV is out there?
I talked to Oak Shannon after he did the interview with Project Unity. I would have loved to have had him on my show, because there was quite a few questions that I had for him. Sadly, that was turned down, but to his credit, he at least wrote me back, but essentially said, whatever he wanted to say was already out there. Does that make the documents stand alone? Look, those that support the validity of these documents are going to hate me for saying this, but I'm going to say no. It doesn't really change much. I believe even from day one that there were elements of real truth to them, but when it came to the claims, it was untrue. I had used an analogy in one of the videos that I did of it being a movie script, that it was the same concept of taking real people, real events, and making a fictionalized scenario. And I had pulled in a script to kind of juxtapose like how they would set scenes and so on and so forth. You look at the Wilson notes, and that was kind of how it was done. No, I didn't bet my house that the notes were a movie script, which some people later claimed that I did and said, well, you believe it's a movie script. No, what I was trying to say was that is a alternate but very plausible scenario that holds just as much credibility and weight with evidence than it does depicting real events. That was my whole point with that. But now you have all these other notes. Does that make the documents stand on its own? And if you want to believe that it does, you will find the connections to make you say that. But for me, I lean towards this. And it is the reality that those notes were likely real notes, like somebody wrote them, right? So I don't think somebody just made them up and put them on the internet. I believe they likely did circulate. I have no doubt, nor have I ever doubted that they came from Edgar Mitchell's estate when that came out. So you have all those elements, and it was probably passed around that circle. But when you look at those circles, it's a very tight circle. And so I think that if it's fabricated, which I lean towards it is, meaning real notes but fabricated events, that it came from that circle. And whether that be Dr. Eric Davis or not, to me, it's irrelevant. It doesn't make sense that any of that would happen in the way that it was depicted. And again, you have to approach it from a standpoint of the plausibility. Would a former J2 Admiral Wilson, be introduced to somebody? It doesn't matter who vouched, and he goes and spills the most heavily classified secrets. And again, it's this whole concept that things can be inherently classified. So all of that information would be classified. People fight me on that, but I have a letter now from DIA proving that the mere existence of a document could be classified if they admitted to it. So my whole point is, it stands true that if they were talking about this, it would be classified in nature. So for Eric Davis to arguably record it or put it down or keep it in his head and he wrote it down later, I really don't care. He puts it all down and then starts circulating it around. I don't buy that on so many levels. And it's not just because I don't want to believe it. That has nothing to do with it. The reality of a J2 doing that is so former J2 would be nil. I just don't see that happening.
Except Oak Shannon said the opposite, that he did introduce the two of them, that he talked to both of them separately and said that both of them should talk to each other about these issues.
Which is fine. But again, that in itself doesn't mean anything. And Wilson could have very well have been introduced to Davis and Wilson just doesn't remember. I mean, how many people do you think somebody like Thomas Wilson meets over the years? But you have to go backwards. You have to see that if this J2 goes out, right, and it's all stemming from a in my opinion, provably fake NRO document as told by Dr. Stephen Greer. Now, the believers in this document want to dismiss that now.
Are you talking about Aquarius?
No, well, I think there was an Aquarius code word or whatever. But no. This is the NRO document with like an Air Force letterhead.
Oh, that was a fabricated document. For sure.
Right. I mean, I think that everybody agrees with me after I put that video out. And the reality, though, is you still have the biggest believers and supporters of this notes still touting that in their story. And so you have this problem, this hole. If that document was given to Wilson that set him off on his journey to find these saps that led him to the reality of aliens, crash retrievals, whatever he was led to, if you take that document out, what's that connector? Where did Wilson go? What did he learn? Right. So where is that? There's a gaping hole now in the story that no one has been able to fill.
Except, and I'm not here to debate.
No, that's fine.
I'm looking at this as objectively as I can. That 1997 meeting at the Pentagon, I think that happened. I think Wilson was there. I think
he's admitted that much, though.
What's that?
He's admitted that much.
Right. And so I think that, if documents aside, I think Wilson was interested in this and his journey started then. I don't know. Those documents, the one that you're talking about, the NRO document, you put those next to any other official NRO document, you can see it's bogus, right?
Right. And that's what I did is I broke down the whole thing on proving it was bogus. So then the rebuttal to me was, well, who cares? That document is not mentioned in the Wilson Davis notes. But for me, that was irrelevant because it's been part of the story. One particular person wrote this gigantic blog. He's kind of more well known as being the kind of the forefront of bringing this information out. And again, it's this very long blog. But then you also have Dr. Stephen Greer, who also still touts that document as being what was given to Thomas Wilson. So again, once you take that out, you now have to say that Thomas Wilson, at the time being a J2, after that meeting, he met with Edgar Mitchell and so on. So he admitted that much. But then he goes out, and although in one breath can say, I was denied access and they wouldn't, let me into the contractor facility or whatever, that story is, but he found out the details of the program and could convey the crash retrieval and the existence of these groups and this, that, and the other thing. Yet again, does not make sense, because if you're going to be blocked out from having access to something, that literally means you are blocked out. You are not going to get any kind of inkling on what is going on in that classified arena.
But you and I are reading it differently. What I get out of that is that Wilson said, I got nowhere. I went out to Lockheed. I'm assuming it was Lockheed. I went out to Lockheed. They shut me down, aliens, whatever. But they said, you can complain all you want, fly back to Washington, D.C. and start yelling. You're not going to get anywhere. And that's what Wilson said. He said he got nowhere with these special access programs and the alien agenda. So that's what I got out of the document. He never said that he had proof of anything. I mean, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think I was saying that he had proof of it, but rather what the scope of the programs were and that he was so angry.
And he never found anything out, though. See, that's what he was saying.
Well, the whole point of the Wilson notes were supporting this whole crash retrieval, this, that, and the other thing, right?
The one meeting out at Lockheed, but he never saw anything.
What meeting are you referring to? If you could just refresh
He says he flew out to California and met with the three dudes, the project manager, the head of security, and the attorney,
and learned about crash retrievals.
They said that they had a craft that they thought could fly, but they couldn't.
But that's what I'm referring to, is that if you're going to be blocked access, they're not going to tell you that they have XYZ in that classified program, but then tell you can't come in, being the J2. That's what I'm referring to.
And again, see, this is what's so interesting to me. When I first read that page, right? I think it's page 13. When I read that page, I went, this is too sensational, right? This is like too perfect, right? It's too perfect here. And what changed my whole thing with that was how it's worded there. He said that they told him, we had somebody come out here from the Pentagon, was trying to audit what we were doing out here. We showed him some stuff and he screwed everything up. So we're not going to know, but we're going to tell you, yeah, it's aliens, but you can't do anything about it. You can go and complain, you can go do this, or you're not going to find anything out. And that's it. And have a nice day. And
okay. So the finer details aside, right? So we have different interpretations. Regardless, let's go with what you just said. That's plausible to you that a J2 would fly out and be confronted by a contractor and they strong arm him into like turning away?
I would no.
It's not plausible, right?
I'm saying the opposite of that. Exactly. I'm not saying I agree with it. What I'm saying is, with Oak Shannon coming out and Jack Houck's notes and Oak Shannon's notes, and you look at all of this, and then you have to step back and go, this might have really happened. That's my point. That this is.
I think the only thing that it's. I mean, I see where you're going with that. I just see it as a different take, that whomever wrote those notes, and I've said this part from day one as well, had knowledge enough to have those names in there and craft a narrative of some kind. And so you're not going to just be Joe Blow, in the general populace and create a document like that and kind of nail some of the points that are accurate, meaning the real names and so on and so forth. So I think that whomever crafted it, in my opinion, this work of fiction, it's going to be from that group that was passing around and having these meetings and talking with each other about these topics. It was a tight niche group. And
why
does
let
that
it
mean
have legs, though? Why let it have legs? Why not Eric Davis coming out and going, dude, I didn't write it. It's BS. This is somebody else's work. It's not mine. Instead of letting
that's a great question. I mean, there's two ways to approach it on my end. Number one is he likes the attention. Sorry, that's also going to come off as rude to some people, but I've seen enough to think that, yes, that is probably part of it. He likes the mystique. And I don't want to just single him out. There's a couple in that group that I feel the same way about, that they like the mystique. They like the idea and concept that they may have secret knowledge to unlock the cosmos, but they can't tell you about it. Sorry, I just think that goes along with part of what we were talking about.
And I agree with you, and I've agreed with you on that point for a couple of years.
Yeah, but the other part of it for me, and I'll make it quick, is the idea that information in here could be classified. And the minute that someone talks about potentially classified information, you in essence are acting as a spokesperson on behalf of the United States government, either confirming or denying. And as a clearance holder, you can't necessarily go there. Why? Because maybe there's one element to something in there that may be true in a classified arena. It doesn't make the whole notes true, but maybe something. Eric Davis comes out and says, oh, look, it's all bunk. I didn't write it, and so on and so forth. You are now speaking on the validity of something in that document. Now, when I interviewed Luis Elizondo a year or two ago, whenever it was, This came up, and I asked him this very question, but didn't gear it towards the Wilson Davis documents. And I went to him with this question, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I did a video on it. I can post this as well for you guys. But I essentially said, listen, Mr. Elizondo, if I came to you and I said, this is allegedly a document that contains classified information, I want you to look at it, and I want you to tell me, is it real or is it not? And I could have typed it. I could have made the whole thing up. But with his security clearance, he essentially told me he could not comment on it because that is something that he cannot do. That's where I kind of lean towards there's a possibility here that those with clearances, even though it may be bunk, it may be partially real, it could be real, I don't know, whatever. But they can't. They just can't comment on it whatsoever. But the internet takes hold of a no comment and translates that into a confirmation. And we can't do that. And I think that that's a line that has very much been blurred over the years, that if somebody says, well, I can't confirm nor deny, that's immediately a confirmation, and we can't do that. And in Luis Elizondo's own words, the way he said it is that you can't comment on something that may or may not be classified because you have to go through official channels and get a spokesperson or somebody who speaks on behalf of the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. If you have a clearance holder and you start asking them questions about what could or could not be classified, you're in some pretty dangerous territory. So the safest route, I got no comment. But what goes along with that is the mystique, that aura of mystery around you, that you have some kind of key to the cosmos that only you can unlock. And that's what's frustrating about these things. But for me, the bottom line is the way the story's unfolded, the details, interpretations between you and I, all of that aside, it doesn't matter. When you read through it, that plausibility of it playing out is incredibly unlikely. Did Oak Shannon introduce them? Yeah, quite possibly. I wouldn't even argue that. It doesn't really matter. But does that mean a former J2 is going to turn around and go, all right, so this guy vouches for that guy, so I'm going to vent not only my frustrations with the U.S. government, but I'm going to touch on that classified a program that I don't have access to, but the confirmation that there's a craft of some kind, or again, whatever the details are in there. It does not make sense.
It doesn't hold water.
Doesn't.
Unless somebody like Oak Shannon steps forward and you got a couple of piles of notes from Jack Houck and Oak Shannon from a meeting in 1985. And I'm just saying, I'm staying objective on this. I think for the first time we've got a document like this. We're calling it a document that suddenly has got characters around it to support it. That's all.
Let me ask you a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
So about the Oak Shannon thing, because this is one of the questions I wanted to ask him, but you've brought that up as an element to kind of keep this going, and that's totally fine. What is the connection on why would Wilson go to Oak Shannon? That's not an insult towards him, but all the resources of somebody in Thomas Wilson's position, all of the resources, he goes to Oak Shannon to ask about Eric Davis. Why?
Well, okay. Did you listen to his interview?
I did.
Okay. So I don't want to put words in his mouth or get into his mind. And I've never spoken to Thomas Wilson, and Eric Davis too as well. So I can't get into the mindset of them. That would just be merely an opinion. But what I am saying here is that when we look at and this is purely from a vibe, when you read the Wilson Davis memo, it screams BS. It screams science fiction BS, well-written BS, but there's, it's there, and it's too good to be true. How could a J2 sit in the back of a car with a guy like Eric Davis in back of the EG&G building at Alien Central, right? Area 51, Janet Air. It's like it's too perfect. It's too unbelievable.
Kind of like a TV show, right?
And then you have John, and then you have a guy like Oak Shannon come out and go, yeah, I introduced those two guys. Absolutely. I talked to one about the other. I talked to the other about the other guy. And suddenly you go, wait a minute here. As crazy as it sounds, they did talk about each other. They did know of each other. And Oak Shannon, who was on page 1 of this memo, page 1, his name is right there. He said it all went down the way it did. So that's all that I'm saying. It's where you've got to back up and go, I need to have an open mind here. I can't shut this down.
It's and I know you're out of time or beyond your time, but for me, it's that question that remains unanswered. The plausibility of Oak Shannon being asked by Thomas Wilson. I want to know why. Like if there's some kind that did not come out to me in the interview, maybe I missed something. I'm open to it. If somebody knows the answer to that, let me know. And I don't want it to come off that I'm calling the guy a liar. Look, he seems incredibly genuine and seemed incredibly honest in his interview. It's not like red flags went off. You're a liar. But the introduction and that part of the story for me just doesn't make all the dominoes fall into place, but rather he's making a claim about the introduction. What I want to know is why him? And that's, I'm sorry, Thomas Wilson would have an enormous amount of resources to vet anybody without anybody knowing. Yet he went to Oak Shannon to vet Eric Davis to then share all these secrets.
Right. John, you're 100% correct. I totally agree with you, except it happened. That's all that I've said.
Except what happened? I'm sorry.
That Oak Shannon said, I introduced Eric Davis and Thomas Wilson. That's all that I'm saying.
But it happened because he said it happened?
Does any of that matter? Does any of that matter? If Oak Shannon doesn't need to say this. You know, Eric Davis isn't commenting on it. Wilson Davis has already said, if this comes out, I'm going to deny everything. And he has. But Oak Shannon comes out and says, yeah. And the comments on page 1 of the document, if you go back and you read it really closely, makes those comments. Oak Shannon's health issues, difficult to get a hold of. I'm glad that we're finally talking. Oak Shannon backs all of that.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but again, if this is a fabricated story, those types of elements are going to be in here because it was likely that a lot of those individuals knew each other.
Sure.
So nobody's shying away that the whole thing is bunk. But talking about Oak Shannon's health issues or an introduction even though the question still stands on why Wilson would need Oak Shannon for vetting. So, but that aside, those types of things they don't drive it home for me because.
And I respect that, but we're going back. My original point about bringing this up. This is the first time that you and I or anybody else can have this kind of conversation. We've never had the ability before to do this. We've never had Bobby Ray Inman come out, and make a public statement about something. Or Twining, right? Or Forstall, whatever. But here we have that, and we are able to have this conversation, and that's the exciting part. Is this the first time that we are able to talk like this in these terms? And I say, yeah, the answer is yes.
I think I missed what you're getting at. You're just talking about the supporting.
We have one of the named people in the document
with Oak Shannon. Gotcha.
Coming out, and it allows us to have this conversation. Yeah, it's never happened before.
I don't disagree with that. I think for me though, at the end of the day, is those unanswered questions with the gaps that cannot be filled. And is it interesting that he made the introduction and came out? Sure. That's why I reached out to him. I mean, look, if I'm wrong about these notes and they're nonfiction and they're true, I'll be the first to admit it. Why? It changes the world. So I'm fine with that. I don't mind. It's not that. So that's why I immediately reached out to him. And credit to Jay from Project Unity for meeting with Oak Shannon and getting him to agree to the interview. All that is awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just at the end, the real elements to the notes, which I think anybody could see that there are factual elements. don't put the rest of the dominoes in place. And I think that just supports that if they are fiction, that it could just mean that whomever created the fiction was involved in that group. And they took elements from this person, elements from that company, elements from this person, and put it all into a story. And again, yes, I made the joke about the TV show, but I'm only half joking, because when you create that type of a fictionalized scenario, that's what you need. You need to stand on things that were real. You look at the X-Files, and I use this example in the video, that there are real things in there that they crutched their stories on. Sometimes it was a UFO case. You have MUFON that found their way into X-Files. But the introduction to those real elements doesn't make the rest of the X-Files a documentary. It's just taking real elements that are out there, because the creative writers took that to crutch the story into reality. Made it more believable for fans like us. We're like, oh my God, MUFON, I know that right. organization. And that's where it really works in a fictionalized story and in the fiction world. So, those real elements, yes, they're interesting. And I know I'm not debating you on this, but I'm just saying generally they're interesting, but it just supports that from day one, that there are real elements to these notes. And nobody's denying that part, but it doesn't make the rest of it real.
Except it's now part of the public record in Congress. Right? Yeah. John, these are exciting times, my friend. You're the absolute
that could backfire, by the way, but that's maybe a different show.
Well, quit poo-pooing on everything.
There were so many other cool things they could have put in congressional record and asked about. That was the wrong thing.
Yeah, you're right about that. Hey, thank you. We went way over. So just thank you for that. And I've got to get you out to the house, and let's barbecue. And then we'll drive down to Lockheed and get arrested. All right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'll bring video cameras. We'll put them over the fence.
John, you're the best, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
The very best. John Greenewald, the Black Vault. That's what I'm talking about. The world needs more of what we just did. Let's just talk, man. Let's talk through this thing. That's all. Let's just talk. Wonderful show tonight. Thank you, John. Just absolutely incredible. Everybody, theblackvault.com is where you want to go hang out. His radio show and everything else is right there over at the Black Vault. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, right now you're listening to Doug Aldrich. The intro to the show, that's Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is owned and copyrighted 2022 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow night, by the way. I've got a guest booked, maybe not. Maybe I'll just do an AMA. Maybe I'll take the night off. I don't know. Everybody have a great, safe night. Go Backley Tappy.